Hello everybody, today we're going to be doing the glosses on porphyry taken from the Logica Ingredientibus by Peter Abelard. We're going to be doing the first half today, which outlines the problem of universals. It also proposes and rejects 2 to 3 theories of universals depending on how you count them. So first, there are the questions. Do genera and species exist, or are they in the opinion only? Are they corporal or incorporeal? Are they in things or separated from them? Those are the 3 usual questions. And then finally, can they exist in the understanding even when every member that makes up the genus or species is destroyed, such as the name of the rose? If you have roses exist, and people view them, but then all of the roses are destroyed, will the universal still exist in someone's mind? What do we have of the name of the rose? That's what Umberto Eco wrote his his Catholic Sherlock Holmes novel on, was the name of the rose. Okay, first, definitions. A universal is that which is apt to be predicated of many. A particular is that which is apt to be predicated of only one. And these apply both to names and things. A universal thing is something that is in many things, whereas a particular is only in one. So we've got the first theory here. Things are universals in themselves, but are made particular by advening forms. So you kind of have like this base of substance, and then you take a bunch of other forms and you throw them on top of substance, and that's how you get all these different substances. But actually there is just one substance, and all of the particulars are kind of built around this one foundation. They exist, they're corporal, they're in things, and they would be in the intellect if all of their instances were destroyed. Objection number 1. Animality contains both rationality and irrationality. There are rational and irrational animals. But contraries cannot inhere in the same subject, so animality cannot actually exist. So the argument here is basically just that a thing cannot be both rational and irrational at the same time. Animality would be irrational and rational at the same time, so animality can't exist. Then there's kind of this dialectic. So there's the first reply. It could be that contraries can inhere in a genus and species, but not in individuals, thus distinguishing the minor premise. That's premise number 2 up here. Then there's the reply to the first objection. Things are reducible to their universals and advening forms. So a Socrates and a donkey are the same being except with respect to their advening forms. So the distinction between particular and abstract doesn't actually help here, because there isn't a particular substance. There is substance, and Socrates and a donkey are both kind of sitting on top of that substance with their advening forms. Reply number 2. It isn't animal which is rational or irrational, it's just the individuals. And then refutation of reply number 2, but rational and irrational still inhere in animal, so it's not getting around the problem. And then we have objection number 2. There are only 10 basic essences, which everything else inheres in, but things are only different from each other by advening forms. But all forms are essences, so things are different by the 10 basic essences, 2 and 3. Everything created contains all of the 10 most basic essences, but then everything shares in what makes everything different from everything else, 4 and 5. So every particular is made different by what is the same in every particular, 1 and 6. So things cannot be made different by what is made the same. So this view is false, because otherwise forms that are shared by everything would be the things that make everything different. It might be good for you to take a minute to pause here and review this slide, because it's a little bit more complex. Then there are objections 3 and 4. These are essentially just statements. Why do we call the same thing many if it is only one? Why do we see many substances if all substances are actually just one substance? And neither can accidents supply individuality, because accidents are posterior to the individuality of the substances. So this is just saying that accidents don't give us a multiplicity of created things, just because there has to be multiplicity before the accidents can exist. Okay, then we've got theory 2. There is a bottom level of distinctness that makes things different from each other. They are composed of genus and species, and those are the same kinds of things, they're the same as each other, but they aren't made distinct by advening forms. They are distinct simply by their distinctness. Okay, and then we've got 2 variations here. Species are construed of as a likeness relationship between different instances. And variation number 2, things are themselves by their personal discreteness, but are part of a class of universals that are in them. So, Objection to version 1 here. On version 1, there's no way to properly quantify a genus because there isn't anything in individuals that corresponds to the classification of sameness. So all genus and species classification becomes arbitrary. You could take any group of things and put them in any arbitrary genus. So you wouldn't really have saved universals here. You would have just made them meaningless. Then we have objection to version 2. The word agreement doesn't refer to anything on this scheme. There's nothing which corresponds to the idea of genus and agreement, because the multiple things that it refers to aren't objectively the same. They just have a kind of like brute similarity which doesn't explain anything. And that will be all for the views that Abelard rejects. I will get to his personal view in my next video. Thank you for listening.